Did you know that in the history and the geography of the Sahel made the Sahelian Niger-Congo groups look like East Africans? Take the Fulani for example. They resemble Kushites even though they do not share any direct genetic links with Kushites. Or take the Wolof for example. They are as jet black skinned and extremely tall, similar to Dinkas, Shiluks, and Mundari with zero Nilo-Saharan ancestry. Let me introduce you to the Niger-Congo people of the Sudanic Belt. This piece of Africa, known as the Sudanic Belt, is a vast semi-arid latitudinal zone stretching across Africa from the Atlantic Ocean to the Red Sea. And the Niger-Congo people in this piece of Africa I would like to call the Niger-Sahelian, or Northwest Africans, the blackest, tallest subgroup of the Niger-Congo genetic race. But what is a Niger-Congo? Well, if you are new to my content, welcome. But previously, I talked in depth about the Niger-Congo racial and linguistic lineage. But in short, the Niger-Congo lineage is one of the largest and most influential human lineages in Africa. Their ancestors diverged from a broader ancestral pool connected to Nilo-Saharan groups, East African hunter-gatherers, and ancestral North Africans approximately 50 to 70,000 years ago. This branch moved into the forest refugia of West Africa during the harsh climatic periods of the Ice Age. Isolation, also known as allopatric divergence, slowly made them genetically distinct from their African cousin populations. And at the end of the Ice Age, the climate of Africa became wetter and more stable. Around this period, they organically discovered farming and organized village life began to emerge across different parts of Africa. As the Niger-Congo lineage grew in numbers and expanded across West Africa, they began splitting into many different branches. Some groups moved deep into the tropical rainforest of West and Central Africa, while others remained in the Sahelian belt. Living in the Sahel for thousands of years shaped these people physically. Exposure to strong ultraviolet radiation, open grassland environments, and hot, dry climates helped produce the tall, dark-skinned, and muscular Sudanid phenotype. A phenotype many first-generation NBA players from the 80s and 90s possessed. This Sudanid phenotype evolved in the same North Equatorial savanna regions where monoracial Nilo-Saharan populations also evolved, which explains why some Sahelian Niger-Congo groups visually resemble Nilo-Saharan populations despite having different genetic backgrounds. In general, this Sudanid population develop long and high skulls, wide low-rooted noses, large faces, prominent lips, small chins, steep foreheads, tightly curled hair, long limbs, and lean muscular bodies. These features help regulate heat in the hot savanna climate. Over time, these people diversified into many major ethnic clusters with hundreds of subgroups, similar to how the Bantu people later diversified across Central, Eastern, and Southern Africa. But before we continue, I have an important announcement. This video is just an introduction to this great lineage, but in my book, World Encyclopedia of African People, I go much deeper. Not only do I mention all Niger-Congo groups, including these Sudanic groups, but also Afro-derived lineages from the oldest to the youngest and many lineages in between, including groups that emerged during the Middle Ages and colonial era, as well as the global Afro-derived diaspora. In each chapter, I explore their genetic and ancestral backgrounds, history and migrations, geographic distribution, phenotypic traits, languages and communication, traditional lifestyles and economies, cultural traits and customs, modern identity and diaspora, and much more to each and every African ethnic group. It's an eye-opening read full of knowledge and one of the best ways to discover your African brethren. The book is available on Amazon and is the best way to support my channel. The link and more details are in description. Thank you very much. Now let's get back to today's video. The first major Sahelian Niger-Congo group are the Atlantic Congo people. These groups are mainly concentrated around Senegal, Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, and coastal parts of West Africa. Historically, They are among the oldest settled populations of the Western Sahel and coastal savanna regions. Their ancestors were heavily involved in fishing, farming, river trade, and the development of some of the earliest organized societies along the Atlantic coast. One of the most famous Atlantic Congo group are the Wolof. The Wolof became dominant in the Senegambian region through the rise of powerful kingdoms such as Jolof. Today, the Wolof language acts as a major trade and communication language across Senegal. Physically, the Wolof represent the purest example of the Senegalese phenotype. They are usually very tall, extremely dark-skinned, lean muscular bodies, and possess long facial structures. Closely related to them are the Serer people. The Serer are one of the oldest populations in Senegal and preserved many ancient spiritual traditions even after the spread of Islam. Phenotypically, they are more mixed between Senegalese base with neighboring Sudanid phenotypes. Then there are the Lebo people, famous historically as fishermen and coastal traders around Dakar. The Lebo also share a more mixed Senegalese appearance. Further south are the Balanta and Manjak people. These groups possess what anthropologists historically called the Sudano-Guinean phenotype. Compared to the Wolof, they tend to have slightly broader facial features and stronger tropical West African influences, due to living closer to forest and coastal environments. Another important Atlantic Congo group are the Jola or Diola, people of the Casamance. The Jola possess the Casamance phenotype, shaped by the humid tropical environments of southern Senegal and Guinea-Bissau. Historically, the Jola were famous for rice farming, decentralized societies, and resistance against outside empires. The second major group are the Mande people. The Mande are one of the most historically influential populations in West Africa. Their origins are tied to the Western Sahel around Mali and Guinea. Unlike many other Niger-Congo groups, the Mande developed massive trading civilizations and empires that shaped African history for over 1,000 years. One of the most famous Mande civilizations was the Mali Empire, founded by the legendary Sundaita Keita during the 13th century. At its height, Mali controlled trans-Saharan trade routes carrying gold, salt, and slaves across Africa into the Middle East and North Africa. Cities such as Timbuktu became global centers of Islamic learning, trade, and scholarship. The Mande branch includes groups such as the Bambara, Madinka, Soninke, Diula, Bozo, Susu, Yalunka, and Vai peoples. The Bambara are one of the largest ethnic groups in Mali and preserved many traditional cultural practices. The Soninke are famous as founders of the ancient Ghana Empire, one of the earliest great Sahelian kingdoms. The Bozo became known as master fishermen of the Niger River, while the Diula became famous merchant communities who spread trade networks and Islam across West Africa. Phenotypically, the Mande populations mainly belong to two major types. The Bambara, Soninke, Bozo, Susu, Yalunka, and Vai generally possess the Sudanid proper phenotype. They are usually tall, dark-skinned, and adapted to savanna climates. Meanwhile, groups such as the Mandinka and Diula possess a Sudano-Guinean phenotype due to historical mixing with forest and coastal populations further south. Linguistically, the Mande languages form a very important branch of the Niger-Congo world. Historically, these languages spread through trade, empire building, and migration. Even today, Mande cultural influences can be seen across music, storytelling traditions, and Islamic scholarship throughout West Africa. The third major group are the Gur people. The Gur populations mainly inhabit Burkina Faso, northern Ghana, northern Cote d'Ivoire, and surrounding regions. Historically, these were organized farming societies deeply connected to the savanna environment. Among the Gur people are the Mosi, Gurma, Dagomba, Senufo, Lobi, Dagara, and Bariba peoples. The Mosi are perhaps the most famous due to the powerful Mosi kingdoms that dominated much of Burkina Faso for centuries. Despite pressure from neighboring Islamic empires, the Mosi managed to preserve strong indigenous political systems and military traditions. The Dagomba of northern Ghana also formed important kingdoms with organized cavalry system and royal courts. The Senofo become famous for their art, sculpture, while the Lobi and Dagara preserve decentralized village-based systems and spiritual traditions connected to ancestor worship. Phenotypically, nearly all Gur population belong to the Sudanid proper type. They are generally tall, dark-skinned, and strongly adapted to the hot savanna environment, mastering agriculture, millet farming, cattle keeping, and iron working, which played major roles in shaping Gur civilization for thousands of years. Now we arrive at perhaps the most visually distinct Niger-Congo group in the Sahel, the Fulani, also known as the Puel or Fulbe. The Fulani are spread across a massive area, stretching from Senegal all the way to Chad, Cameroon, and Sudan. Historically, they were nomadic cattle herders who moved across the Sahel following grazing routes. The origins of the Fulani are still debated, but genetically, they are primarily connected to West African Niger-Congo populations with ancient admixture from North African Amazigh people. Over thousands of years, this mixture created their unique appearance. Unlike neighboring Sudanid populations, the Fulani develop a lighter and narrower featured phenotype known as West Ethiopid. The West Ethiopid phenotype is essentially a blend of Senegalid, Targid, and Berberid influences. Internally, the Fulani themselves are highly diverse. Among them are the Fulatoro of Senegal, the Fulbelade, the Wadabe or Bororo, famous for their beauty traditions and facial aesthetics, the Fauta Jalon Fulani of Guinea, the Adawama Fulani of Cameroon, and the Bagerimi Fulani further east. Historically, the Fulani played massive roles in West African history. During the 18th and 19th centuries, Fulani Islamic scholars and warriors launched major jihads that created powerful states across northern Nigeria, Mali, and surrounding regions. The Sokoto Caliphate became one of the largest pre-colonial African states in history. Although the Fulani speak Niger-Congo languages, their culture was heavily shaped by interaction with Berbers, Arabs, and Sahelian populations. Their cattle-centered lifestyle, nomadic traditions, and clan systems made them one of the most mobile populations in Africa. Other populations in the Sahel also share ancestry or historical mixing with the Niger-Congo groups, even if they are not linguistically Niger-Congo themselves. One major example are the Hausa people. The original founders of the Hausa were Afro-Asiatic speakers connected to West Eurasian populations around Chad and the central Sahel. Over centuries, they mixed heavily with the local Sudanid populations until much of their original ancestry became diluted into the larger Hausa identity we know today. Physically, many Hausa populations possess the Sudanid proper phenotype despite speaking an Afro-Asiatic language. Other mixed Niger-Congo populations include groups like the Shua Arabs and Black Tuaregs, who possess more mixed Niger-Congo and West Eurasian ancestry from Peninsula Arabs in the case of the Shua and Targi Berbers in the case of the Black Tuaregs. There are also mixed Nilo-Saharan populations such as the Tubu, Shunghai, Zarma and Kanuri peoples who developed through centuries of interaction between Sahelian civilizations. The Sahel has always been one of the greatest crossroads in human history. Traders, herders, warriors, and migrants moved across this region for thousands of years. The Sudanid/Sahelian belt became one of the most genetically and culturally diverse regions in Africa. Yet despite all this diversity, the Niger-Congo peoples of the Sudanic belt still remain connected through shared ancestry, related languages, and similar adaptations to their harsh but beautiful savanna environment. That's it for today's video. If you like this video, make sure to watch the origins of the Niger-Congo lineage or the Bantu people explained. And as always, stay curious, stay smart, and thank you very much for watching.